Hey, what's up, y'all? Monique Melton here, founder of the Shine Bright School. Welcome back to the channel. Before we get too far into our conversation, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button right now if you're not subscribed just yet. Today, what we're going to be talking about is friendships. Specifically, is it safe for Black women, Black folks to be in friendships with white folks? Now, this is definitely a conversation that gets folks riled up. And there's a lot to think about, there's a lot to explore, there's plenty of room for nuance and also your own personal experiences and your own personal take. This is my perspective from my lived experience, from my education, as well as my observation. This is what I believe at this moment as it relates to being a Black woman in friendships with mostly white women and just white folks, period. Here are some thoughts that I have, and I think it's really important that you take a moment to hear what I'm trying to say and see where your areas of growth and further exploration show up for you as you listen today. When I think about the question, are friendships with white women possible for Black women? The answer that comes up for me is sure. And it's complicated. And we can say that about all sorts of relationships. And there are going to be a number of reasons why those particular relationships are complicated. And I'm just going to share a few of those reasons when it comes to being a Black person in relationship with white folks and what makes it complicated and what often makes it a unsafe relationship, an unsafe place to be in for Black folks. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you'll get something out of this and see what type of adjustments you can take. We also have a lot of really great classes where we explore these topics and offer you tools and resources. So definitely check those out as well. There's plenty of room for nuance. There's plenty of room to explore your own personal experiences, and that's good. That's good. I'm speaking from my lived experience as a Black woman who has been in many relationships. I've had many interactions with other white folks, especially white women. And for me, it's complicated. But actually, in a lot of ways, it's not as complicated anymore for me personally. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. One of the reasons why these relationships can be really challenging for Black folks, particularly when it comes to being in friendship with white folks, is that often the white person in the relationship is not doing their work, meaning their anti-racism work. They're not taking the intentional time and effort to unpack their racial identity, to understand their history, to understand whiteness and how it shows up, white culture, and all these different components that inform how they see themselves, how they see the world, their habits, their behaviors, their beliefs, and so on. And so when you're not taking that work very seriously and you're not taking a very intentional and consistent practice of doing this work, without a doubt, without a question in my mind, showing up in a friendship with a Black person is going to put that Black person at an increased risk of experiencing racial harm directly from you. Now, I know that folks will say, but I love my friends. I love my Black friends. I would never do anything to them to hurt them. Here's the thing. You can love someone and still hurt them, whether you are intentionally doing it or not. Now, if you love someone and you're intentionally hurting them, I question whether or not you actually love that person. But Bell Hooks tells us about that in her book, All About Love. But anyway, when you are in friendship with someone and you refuse to acknowledge your identity and the historical implications that come with that, as well as the present day and your personal implications that come with that, and you ignore that and just think that only thing that matters is that we love each other, there leaves a lot of room for harm that you probably don't even intend to make. You probably don't even intend to show up and be harmful in your friendship. But because you're not being responsible about your identity and how that affects your friend and that relationship, there is just so many room and opportunity for harm. And you can reduce that by intentionally doing your work, taking a personal commitment to that work, and doing that work within relationship with other white folks, doing that work one-on-one. Maybe you're working with a coach or a consultant. You're doing some work within private small groups and community, but you're not using your relationship with that Black person as the work. I'll never forget this conversation that I had with a white woman who gave me very, very much red flags, performative, allyship, nonsense. And I remember asking her, tell me about this work that you're doing. What does it look like for you? And her response to me was something along the lines of, well, I like to do this work within my friendships. And I don't remember exactly what I responded back saying, but I do remember feeling like that is such a mistake. And it really pains me to think of the friends who you are in a relationship with who are being tokenized in this way, who are being used in this way, who probably did not consent to be your personal anti-racism educator, your Black history educator, your 1-800 phone a Black girl. Chances are they did not sign up for that. And to use your friendship with Black folks as a means of doing this work, or somehow as a stamp of approval that you're somehow the exception or that you've arrived, using your proximity to Blackness is such a mistake that sets up room for so much harm and violence that can be avoided in a lot of ways if you instead took a personal commitment and engaged in this work and built a daily practice of anti-racism and committing to Black liberation. That means you're going to show up very differently in your friendship with that Black person, not because you're expecting them to shift or you're expecting them to be doing the work for you, but instead because you have taken your own personal investment in this work. You're doing the changing inner work that you're doing and shifting and all of that. And it's changing the way you're seeing things. It's changing the way you communicate, how you express, how you engage, and so on. And that relationship can be that much more healthier and a safer space for that Black person when you commit to your own personal work. Another reason why these relationships can be complicated and in many cases just really uncomfortable for Black folks is that a lot of times white people will see us as a monolith. And that's just not the case. And just because your Black friend hasn't told you that you've done something racist, it doesn't mean that you haven't done something racist. There are a number of reasons why we don't share about something racist that a friend or relative or someone has done to us. And sometimes we might not even see it as such. However, just because your friend, one, hasn't told you about it or doesn't see something as racist, but yet another Black person does, it does not mean that it's not racist. Especially because Black folks, we get to decide for ourselves with no other necessary validation, affirmation, external affirmations of any kind. We get to decide for ourselves what is racist. We don't need anyone else to qualify it for us. So if I, Monique Melton, says that when you did XYZ, that was racist, and you go and tell that story to another Black person, they may say, well, I don't think that's racist. It doesn't invalidate my feelings and it doesn't invalidate theirs. It means that you can't treat us as a monolith. And if one person doesn't agree with another person's experience of racism and it being deemed as that, that's not your invitation to side with the person who is saying that it's not racist, to absolve yourself of the responsibility of engaging appropriately and shifting your behavior. Because if I'm uncomfortable with something that you're doing, I am allowed to say that. I am allowed to express that. And I don't need someone else to validate that for me. That's really important to remember. I can remember many conversations where folks would say, well, my Black friend doesn't have a problem with this, or my Black friend never told me this, and they never said this to me, as an attempt to silence me or to reprimand me or to correct me or challenge me when I'm calling out racist behavior that they are likely engaging in, but no one in their life has told them about it, especially the Black people in their life, or someone has told them that it's okay to do that behavior. And so when they encounter someone like me who's challenging behavior that they're engaging in, there's a lot of defensiveness that comes up. And right away, they will use a nearby Black person who maybe hasn't called that out or doesn't have a problem with it as evidence that somehow I'm wrong. And that's a very problematic approach to take when you are learning from anyone, or you're wanting to show up and just be a more affirming human being, a person who's more committed to Black liberation. We're going to have differences. And so if I say, hey, this behavior is inappropriate and I think that you should disengage in this behavior, but you don't want to, then you're making that more about yourself versus being in solidarity with folks who you are in a position of the oppressor. So that is really important to explore, and there's plenty more to unpack with that. I'm going to give you one more because we're going to have to break this up into two parts, and I'll do a part two to explain a couple more examples. But I'm going to give you one more reason why I feel like these relationships can be really complicated. Your friends and family aren't doing the work either. Or maybe you're doing the work and they're not. And when you invite us to be in community with each other, maybe at an event or something, because they're not doing their work, those environments can be high stress for us. And oftentimes we experience more racial violence while being in a space that's supposed to be celebratory or fun, relaxing, but instead, because we're probably one of the few Black people there, if not the only one, and the folks who are there are not doing their own work, that is very much a recipe for disaster. So that's one of the reasons why sometimes these relationships can be really complicated, because maybe you're doing your work, but your partner or your friends, your family, and folks who you're in community with, they are not doing their work, or not to a level to where being around them can be a less stressful experience. Then that sets up a lot of limitations in terms of things that we'll do together, or if we are going to be together, there's increased opportunity and increased chance of more harm taking place, which can wear on the relationship. So these are just a few examples. And like I said, we have a lot more that we discuss around this topic in our different programs that we have in the Shine Bright School. I definitely encourage you to check that out. We have so many great opportunities for you to learn from. That way you can take that knowledge in, process, reflect, and make the necessary shifts as you go along. So I thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share this conversation so that we can continue this awareness and helping folks to be able to navigate these sometimes really challenging but important conversations. And as always, keep shining brighter together.